Welcome to the Herf and Dan Show. Today is June 27th, and we have a big time guest today. What's going on, AB? How you doing?
What's up, guys? Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely.
What's up, Mr. Adam?
I'm back. This is round two. Is this my second time on the Herf and Dan show? I was on like 2 years ago, I think.
I think that was technically just Herf making a podcast. I don't know. I think I was talking on it, but it was under a different umbrella. So this is sort of the first time, but happy to have you here.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah, I mean, now we got all the good, like, Shure microphones, so this is as legit as it comes now.
Yeah, exactly. But I guess, awesome, like all of I feel like I see you on my phone all the time. Like you're everywhere, which is sick. And I feel like you've had a bunch of success in the new media space. But I feel like it might be cool to kind of just start from the beginning and like obviously big time football recruit, played Division I football and then ended up in the media space. But I think maybe just taking us back to like high school Adam, probably like, I don't know, 60 pounds, 60, 70 pounds ago, but big dog getting recruited by all the big schools. Like how was that process? And
over again.
no, I mean, you don't want to be a big guy in high school, He was like a wide out size.
I'm at my weight right now. Dude. You know that's a sensitive subject.
No, dude. You don't want to be like a 190-pound tight end.
No. I mean, most tight ends are skinny in high school.
Exactly. So, yeah. I mean, it's not like you were an anomaly. But anyways, like, take us back to Cedar Cliff, like when did you start getting big time, looks and how did that whole process go?
Yeah, man, it's funny. I was like really bad at sports and football when I was like in middle school, and then I don't know, like at some point I just like caught up with my body. And my freshman year at Cedar Cliff, I started playing varsity football. I remember Jim Cantafio, our head coach. I think Ryan, you met him a couple of times, right? Coach Cantafio. He coached like a bunch of big time D1 athletes, and he brought me in to his office when I was a freshman and was like, dude, if you keep going at this rate, like you're going to have an offer from every school in the country. I literally thought he was crazy. I was like, dude, what? Like I'm not even athletic. Like I'm like 6'3" at this time. And then it just kind of took off from there. Like he was right. And I played safety and wide receiver my freshman year at Cedar Cliff. And then it wasn't until my sophomore season where I played wide receiver, and had some success, had a bunch of catches that like the offers started rolling in. My first offer was Boston College. I tried to commit on the spot. I got a Boston College offer. My dad was like, just hold on a second. You know me, I get excited, right? So I got excited about Boston College, and then tried to commit on the spot. I was like, just wait. So then Boston College happened, and then Notre Dame after that. And once Notre Dame came, the whole thing breaks wide open.
Yeah,
is there something where like a Notre Dame or an Alabama offers you and then every school just kind of gets behind just because those are like the premier programs? Like they just start throwing you an offer just because Bama did? Is that a thing?
Yeah, well, it's not necessarily like just because they did, but it certainly helps because what happens in all these football programs, there's a personnel department, right? The personnel department has to evaluate all the players, and then once they sign off, it goes to the coaches to decide if they offer them. If Notre Dame offers a kid, everyone goes and evaluates them right away, right? It's like, when I was at Arizona State, I saw a tight end got offered by Michigan that I hadn't known about. I'm texting my evaluation guy that works in the personnel department immediately and was like, we need to watch this kid. Like, why did Michigan offer him? Like clearly we're missing something here. So that's what happens. Notre Dame offers me, and then every school in the country is like, well, let's go watch this kid's film. It's you're kind of under the radar until one program finds you, and then you get on everyone's radar. I don't think schools are like, just because Notre Dame offered them, we're going to offer them too. There's a whole process that they go through to decide who gets offered.
Right, so that kind of, once you get that offer, it's like, let's take a look at this kid
let's take a look, yeah.
Because we didn't know who he is. But what was the initial offer from Boston College? Was that wide out or tight end or?
Tight end. So it was all tight end.
Gotcha.
Most tight ends in high school are like what's called a projection position in coaching. Like you're projecting a player to play tight end because really, if you're a top tight end in high school, you don't actually play tight end because like that's not a super impactful position. So you either normally play quarterback. A lot of times, small school kids like they play quarterback and then move to tight end, or you play or you play wide receiver so you can like get the ball more and then move to tight end. So very rarely, unless it's like a powerhouse program with a bunch of D1 dudes, does a tight end actually play tight end in high school. So yeah, that was me. I played wide receiver and I played like outside linebacker, but was a projected tight end for at the next level, and everyone knew that. I knew that. It was just kind of like you're going to grow into this. Same thing that like Gesicki, he was a receiver in high school, projected to play tight end.
Gotcha. That's interesting. But growing up, did you sort of have a favorite team? Was Penn State like your favorite college team, and were you just like waiting for that offer, or who was like, I can't wait to get this offer?
Yeah, Penn State, dude. The Penn State thing was funny because I got recruited by Paterno's staff for a little bit. So it was Paterno's like second half of his staff, and then O'Brien came in, right? But I grew up loving Penn State. Went to all the Penn State games. It's like I always said though during my recruitment, I wasn't going to go to Penn State because I didn't want to be like everybody else, right? Like everyone from Cedar Cliff goes to Penn State. I didn't want to do that. I was going to do my own thing. So I was kind of anti-Penn State. Then Paterno's staff. At this point, Paterno's still the head coach. I have offers from every school in the country. Like everyone's offered me, except for Penn State. Right? Like my hometown school won't offer me. It was pissing me off. It went through this whole. I was going to camps. I was trying to get an offer from Penn State, and Penn State would not offer me under Paterno's staff. They kept saying, "You're too young." I'm like a junior at this point. Like we want to see you develop more. So Penn State never offered me until O'Brien got hired, and then Bill O'Brien offered me as soon as he got hired. But for some reason, like Paterno's staff never really pulled the trigger. They might have done it like the very end, like Paterno's like last couple days, like when all that was going down. But like during my whole recruitment, Penn State never offered me. But that's where I wanted to go in the beginning. Then had decided like, oh, I'm not going to go there. I'm going to go to like the SEC or do something different, not just go to Penn State. And then once O'Brien got there, it was like, I guess we're going to Penn State.
Sounds like a Mike McQuarrie move. Like, yeah, we're going to play hard to get on the local kid here.
Dude, that Mike McQuarrie thing, that whole like Penn State scandal. Mike McQuarrie was my recruiter at Penn State. So he was the one that was calling me all the time. Didn't offer me, like I said, but he was on Paterno's staff. Obviously, he's the one that was part of the whole scandal with Jerry Sandusky at Penn State. I remember when the Penn State scandal broke. It was right after it was in the fall, like 2011 or 12, and the news broke about Sandusky getting indicted, and all the Penn State football involvement, like Paterno, all this stuff was getting talked about. And McQuarrie's all over the news because in the indictment, in the grand jury report, is McQuarrie's name about all this different stuff. McQuarrie's a wide receivers coach. He calls me after my game, and it's all over the news, and he's like, Adam, listen, man, I know you're seeing a lot of news right now. He says, it's a 24-hour news cycle, man. 24-hour news cycle. They'll be on to the next topic tomorrow. And I was like, all right. Like I was telling my dad, I was like, my parents, I'm like, yeah, this will all blow over at Penn State. Like not a big deal. Like it'll be over with tomorrow. And then like I didn't hear from him for like a couple of days. I called him. I remember I called him and it just went straight to like, beep, 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 the number you're trying to call is no longer in service. And I never heard from Mike McQuarrie again. And boy, was he wrong. He was wrong about the 24-hour news cycle.
That did not blow over.
Yeah.
Such a funny thing to say. Be like, this is all going to be completely gone by tomorrow. That's such a bananas thing to say. But yeah, I mean, also kind of wild that like they weren't offering you, but then they're calling you right after a game just to tell you it's going to blow over. Like kind of a weird dynamic there.
I think the offer thing in college football, it's changed now. And Penn State was different. Like Penn State used to really like want to make sure that offering someone now in college football means that we're interested in you. It just means like, hey, like we're seriously interested. An offer doesn't actually mean anything. It's all verbal. And at Arizona State, we offered 300 kids. You can only take 25. Like you offered to like get in the door, and then you kind of decide like, okay, here's our board. So the way it actually works, if you find this interesting, is like at tight end, we'll have our top 10 tight ends, one through 10. I know going into the class, I can only sign one tight end based on scholarship spots. Like you carry 5 on your roster, we're losing one, I can sign one guy. If you're signing one, that means that you're going to recruit 10, knowing you're only going to get one of the 10 guys to actually come to your school. So you go and offer all 10 guys, knowing that we want the number one guy. And then you kind of deal with it like, so you want number one, you offer all 10. Say number 5 tries to commit on the board. Then you got to decide like, okay, do we take the commitment from number 5 because like we don't think we're going to get 1 through 4, or do we say no to number 5, hold them off because we still think we can get number 1? So it's like all this numbers game of like you offer all these kids doesn't actually mean you take all of them. You're always trying to get your top guy on the board. It's interesting.
That's wild. Yeah. So like if your number 1 tight end and your number 5 tight end commit on the same day, it's like you just say to the one, like, no thanks.
Yeah, I mean, or you take both and figure it out. Like you take both commitments, and then then you kind of figure out either, okay, we need to either move our roster around, like move our scholarship allotment around, or you do what's called dropping. You drop one of them. So like a lot, like we did it at ASU. Like schools will at the end of the cycle, it's messed up. Will like drop kids and say we're not signing you because again, offers and commitments are all verbal. No actual commitment on either side. You can get out of it whenever. The only thing that matters is what you sign on the dotted line for the letter of intent. So yeah, I mean, if 2 guys try to commit, you got to decide either which one do we want, or like Ohio State when they recruited me, they were open. They said we have 1 spot at tight end. It's between you and this kid Marcus Ball, who ended up committing to Ohio State. He's like, whoever commits first is our tight end for the class, and then your offer goes away when that kid commits.
Damn, I did not know that. That's crazy.
It's so crazy to think that you're making these tough decisions on what university to go to when you're 17, 18 years old. It still blows my mind because that's such a big decision. Did you have a lot of people like chirping you in your ear, like, this is what you should do, this is the betterment of your future, like your parents or people around you, coaches?
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. Like I had obviously like had a good support system. Like my parents were super involved in the whole process. My high school head coach was super involved. So I kind of had that support. You know, I wouldn't say like I had too many people like chirping in my ear. I mean, most of the people like just want to be part of it. And I think one of the coolest parts of like that whole recruiting process for me, and then I tell kids now, like the ability to like bring people along with you through it. Like so many people like get to live a dream along with you while you're getting recruited. Mm-hmm. Like it's so cool for like your high school principal to have like Brian Kelly walking in the door at your high school. Like True. When would that ever happen at Cedar Cliff? So I don't know. I felt like people weren't really like trying to push me one way or another. For me, it was just cool to like take that whole community, like, because again, there's not that many kids that get recruited at the level I did from Cedar Cliff, just to like be part of that when freaking coaches would come to the school and, you know, all that different stuff. That was the coolest part of it for me.
Looking back, I know you shut down the Cedar Cliff Gymnasium and did this whole big announcement whenever you committed to Penn State. Would you do the same thing now, or would you have done it a little bit differently?
No, I would not have done that if I could redo it. I mean, man, I certainly, I mean, I think a lot of people that like that had the experiences I had would probably say similar things. I've talked to a lot of guys about it. I mean, actually, I don't think I would have done it the same way I did it. I think at that point, number one, the reason I did it really was social media wasn't like a huge thing. That makes us sound really old. And it was a time it was at Penn State, right? It was the Penn State scandal. Like I felt like I could be kind of like a face and a voice for Penn State and build some excitement. And it was really cool to do that. Like that place was packed. It was a cool experience. At the end of the day, like I think a lot of how I handled my recruitment and how I handled that, a lot of the guys at the Penn State in the locker room at Penn State did not like. Like they did not like the fact that I was like going around talking about restoring the roar when I was in high school, and like I wasn't even on the team yet. You know, it was like, what have you done, dude? What do you mean you're saving Penn State football? Like you haven't. And then when I got to Penn State, Bill O'Brien said that to me all the time. He was like, not just to me, to other guys too, he taught me a lot about like earning respect and like that. Only thing that matters is how you work and actually producing on the field. Like the only way that people will like you is if you play well on Saturdays. Like that's the only way. And like I had all this like hype, and I walked in there with all this attention, and I feel like I brought a lot of it onto myself, and I don't think a lot of like the older guys in the locker room like that. So I had to do a lot of like showing who I really was and like building down that wall and showing that I'm working. And then it wasn't until like I had success as a freshman that you really get to like where you get respect from the locker room, right? Because you walk in there and they're like, "Who's this 5-star kid? He thinks he's like helping restoring the roar and bringing this program back, but he hasn't done shit yet." So that's kind of the perspective. I think that I thought I was really, really cool in high school, and like I felt that I was like on top of the world and wanted all this attention, and I got humbled like really quick in my football career, obviously, and I think I would handle a lot of things differently from what I did when I was in getting recruited for sure.
Was there a moment where you got kind of smacked in the face? Because I think it's funny how when you're getting recruited, they're just kissing your ass. Anything you need, you got it. But then when you actually get there, is there a moment that you're like, oh, they're not like nice anymore? They're my coaches now. Like, was there a time where like any coaches lashed out at you and you're like, oh, fuck, this is different than getting recruited?
Without a doubt. Yeah, I mean, that happened to me as soon as I got there. Bill O'Brien, like, just would started coming at me all the time. Because, again, when you're getting recruited, I'm sure, number one, I was, like, annoying to recruit. Like, I'm sure that was the case. Had I been on the other side of it, I would not have wanted to recruit myself. And definitely was a needy recruit. And then when you get there, yeah, like, I think O'Brien, like, handled me really well when I got there because I think he saw that I needed to – like come down to earth a little bit. And I mean, I remember my very first team meeting, like very first one. I get there for spring semester, right? I enrolled early and I'm sitting in the team meeting room and it's like our team meeting where they introduce the new young guys and all this stuff. So I introduced myself to the team. Everything's cool. O'Brien's now talking about game one was against Syracuse. 2013 was our first game that coming season. This is like January, way before the season. But, you know, you start talking about like week one, Syracuse, like let's start thinking about it right away. I remember O'Brien stood in front of the team and he was talking to the team about Syracuse. And he just stops in the middle of his speech and he says, Breneman, I promise you one thing. Syracuse does not give a fuck how many stars you have anymore. And like in front of the whole team, and I was just like, okay, like, this is my first meeting. And that was like my first moment of like, oh, this isn't recruiting anymore. Like this is now I'm on the team.
That's so funny. Just to stop a team meeting and just rip you for no reason.
Yeah,
well,
like,
maybe you deserved it a bit, but yeah.
They do not care how many stars you have. Like, and he would say that all the time. Like, and I think he did a good job of like making you know, I mean, I think he was really O'Brien was really tough on me that first year. I mean, and he would always say that I'm tough on you because I want you to be able to play, and I did. I played as a freshman, but I went through a lot of growing up there in that first. He kicked me out of a practice.
For what?
When I was spring ball. This was I've like hardly ever seen coaches kick a player out of practice before. O'Brien kicked me out during spring practice. It was like middle of spring practice. I'm having a bad day of practice, like just bad, like just not playing well. O'Brien's on me all day, just on my case, like 5-star my ass, like who said you were a 5-star, like all this stuff. And I run a route the wrong way. It's a seam route. You know, you guys both played football, like 2 high safety, you take the middle, 1 high, you keep it wide away from the safety, right? So like I read the safeties wrong and like bended my route. I bent my route like right into the safety and like just ran right into coverage. Moron. And I remember like coming off the field and O'Brien's like, Breneman, it was cover 2. What are you doing? And I looked at him and I was like, and I argued with him. I was like, it was cover 3. And like yelled right back at him. And he was like, what'd you just say? And I was like, it was cover 3. And he was like, get the fuck out of here. And I was like, and I like keep walking. He's like, no, get out of practice. Like, go home. Get out of here. And like, he's just screaming and he blows his whistle and he calls our tight ends coach was John Strollo. He's like, Strollo, get Breneman the fuck out of my practice. And like, he just kicked me out. I like had to walk off practice, like went in the locker room.
Dude, that's
and then he
so
came
funny.
up to me. He did call me up to his office after and he was like, dude, number one, like never talk back to me on the practice field, like ever. I don't care if I'm wrong, right? Like, do not ever. He goes, this was his point. Especially if you've never played yet. Like, if you've never actually called a pass at Penn State, do not talk to me on the practice field.
Right.
And he was right. Like, Ryan would talk about that all the time. Like, I loved him because he would always say, too, he said, there's a scale. He was like, he was so real. Most coaches are like, everyone's equal. I love everyone the same. But Brian was like, there's a scale, dude. Like, if you're really good at football, like, and make a lot of plays on Saturdays, then you can probably get away with messing some other things up. You can probably miss a few classes. You can probably get in trouble a little bit. He's like, if you are really bad at football, and like, then you can't get away with any of that stuff. And he would just say that all the time.
Just anyway, a realist.
Yeah, that's my Bill O'Brien stories. He was just real.
It's so funny
awesome.
Thinking about like 5-star 17-year-old Adam Breneman just coming out of high school trying to argue with what was Super Bowl winning coach, Tom Brady's quarterbacks coach and offensive coordinator. They're like, what a full circle moment. Gotta love it.
So awesome. But then you started to have some success freshman year. Like, what was the first big game that you kind of balled out?
Yeah,
Is it
my
Purdue? I'm trying to
first
remember.
touchdown, first touchdown was
Wisconsin?
Purdue. Yeah, Wisconsin was the last game of the year. Purdue was my first touchdown, so the season went super up and down for me. This is another great O'Brien story. So I start the season like playing a decent amount. Like I actually got the start the second game of the year against Eastern Michigan. Actually had a holding call very first play of the game. I've done a TikTok on that. Still got reamed out, but anyway, was like playing, but like not playing well. I was like not ready to play. But O'Brien, because again, even though we went through all this stuff, like I was his guy. Like he brought me to Penn State out, so he wanted me to play. But I wasn't playing very well, and then Michigan game happened middle of the season. I think you guys were there, right? Or Ryan, you were at the Michigan game freshman year, 4 overtime game.
Yep, I was there.
Yeah, huge overtime game. Going into the game, I have a great week of practice, and I'm supposed to play a ton and like be a featured guy on the field. Like I'm like we have plays in for me, like in game planning, you package plays together. I had a whole package. Like let's get out on the ball. Freshman year against Michigan, like 10 times. I'm calling my parents. I'm gonna have the biggest game. Like first red zone call is to me, like for a touchdown. I'm gonna have a massive game. So early on in the game, I go in for like the first play that's supposed to go to me. I just jack the route up. It's supposed to be like a 12-yard dig route. I break it like 6 yards. Like I'm just nervous. Like Michigan game. Oh, you know what's funny is O'Brien. So the broadcasters actually made me. Kirk Herbstreit had me as his player to watch in the game for the game, and that comes from the coaches, right? The coaches tell the broadcasters who to watch. So like national TV is like Adam Breneman, this freshman tight end, is like a player to watch. Long story short, I mess up that first route. I don't even like go back in the rest of the Michigan game. I like barely even play. I barely even play until we went to second overtime against Michigan. I'm like hardly even playing. We were down by one. It's like the second. We're the second team to get the ball in the overtime. So Michigan just scored, kicked the extra point, right? So then we score a touchdown, and then we either kick an extra point to tie or go for 2 to win, right? This is second overtime. So we're on the sideline, and O'Brien is like thinking about going for 2. And he's like, he calls out the personnel group that I'm in, which was called wheels, which means I go on the field and like I'm in on this play. And the play he's about to call is to me in the flat. I'm at fullback, it's play action, and I go catch the ball in the flat for a touchdown, for the 2-point conversion. I'm like, so he's getting ready to call this play. I'm like shitting my pants. I'm like, dude, I haven't played in 3 quarters, and this is like the biggest game, second overtime against Michigan, whiteout, and I'm about to get the ball thrown to me to win the game, or I drop it to lose the game. And this actually wasn't the story I was getting to, but O'Brien like is calling the play. He looks at me, swear to God, and he goes, "Kick the thing, kick the extra point." So then it's like, all right, whatever. So then we kick this point. Then we win in the third overtime, but I don't play the rest of the game. After that game, I remember I was like so upset because I thought I was going to have a massive game, and I didn't even play. I like didn't even go in the game. I played like 2 snaps. And I remember talking to my dad, and I was like, dude, like this just isn't. I'm like, I may need to transfer. O'Brien hates me. This ain't going to work out. And I remember my dad being like, dude, coaches are humans. Like they want to know that you care. Like go ask O'Brien to talk to him in person in a meeting. Like, just go talk to him and be like, Coach, I'm struggling. Like, what do I do? And I was like, dude, I can't. Like, he's my coach. I can't go, like, talk to him like that. He was like, I'm telling you, like, just text him and say, Coach, can I come talk to you? So with my dad's pushing and advice, I texted O'Brien. I remember after that game, it was a bye week. I texted O'Brien, and I was like, Coach, can I come talk to you in your office? And he was like, yeah, come up whenever you want. So I go up to see him. He's actually in a staff meeting, like recruiting meeting, leaves the meeting and meets with me. And I was just like, Coach, like, I want to play, but like clearly I'm not playing well. Like, what do I have to do? And he was like, and we just talked and we watched a bunch of film, and he was like, dude, like you don't practice well. Like you don't practice well at all. Like I see you do 1 of every 10 plays, you make a freak play, and then you don't do it. Like you don't show up for practice and play well. So he's like, if you practice well, I'll trust you and get you the ball more. But right now I can't trust you in a game because I can't trust you in practice. So we talked about it. He's like, listen, it's a bye week. I'm going to give you a chance to like go play well and like treat bye week like every day's a game. And I'm going to give you a ton of reps and like go prove to me in bye week that you can play the rest of the season. So I said, all right, like let's do it. So then the bye week came. I had an unreal week of practice in bye week, like just the locked in. He was helping me too, like giving me easy opportunities and then giving me some tough ones, and I was capitalizing. And then the rest of the year, I started the rest of the year, and that's when I had all my touchdowns. Like I had all the catches, and that's when I became like a freshman All-American. Was all the second half of the year. I started the last 5 games after the bye week. So it's crazy. Like if I wouldn't have had that meeting with O'Brien, that would have never happened.
Right. Yeah. And it seems like like you're down. You don't want to go talk to a guy who's kind of been trashing you, telling you like you're going to play. But just as like an 18-year-old, you're probably not thinking you're probably thinking like more fuck you than you're thinking, I should go talk to this guy.
I told the guys like when I was coaching that story all the time because it was like the lesson I think is that at the end of the day, it's a lesson for a lot of things. Like people are human at the end of the day. Like even a coach who's like a macho dude, like they're human beings and people like want to invest in people that they think care about things. So just the fact that you go and talk to the coach and like, I know I suck right now, but like, what do I have to do to get better? Like that just makes the coach in the back of his mind, like you a little bit more. Like, okay, I want to give him an opportunity because he came to me. And I would tell guys that all the time, like, don't be afraid to go ask for help or like talk to your coaches because they're people too. They're not just, these macho figures.
Yeah, I feel like that could be applicable to like any bosses too.
No
just
doubt.
a normal boss is just like, I want to know that you're actually trying or recognize that you kind of suck right now.
No doubt.
But
Was it
after
your freshman year that O'Brien left? Was that after freshman year? Because you didn't redshirt. Was it right after freshman year?
After
and do you remember
year,
when you like found out about that?
Oh yeah. Yeah, dude, I could tell you O'Brien stories for days. I'm going off.
I'm here for him.
My story time, dude. So this is another great one, dude. So Brian, first of all, when we went to Penn State, to play for Bill O'Brien, right? That's like the reason we went. So I remember like when we were about to go there, we would say to coach, because there were already rumors after year 1 of him going back to the NFL. We were like, Coach, this was year 1 before, because I was there his second year. Year 1, I was still in high school. It was like, Coach, if we commit, if me, Hackenberg, these guys commit, will you stay at Penn State for our careers? He was like, I'll stay. Now, in hindsight, like I know that he has to say that, and like he probably didn't think he was going to leave, but things changed, so I don't blame him. But like he said, I'll stay. So we're like, okay, well then we'll go to Penn State. After freshman year, I remember like seeing the rumors, like Bill O'Brien's a top candidate for the Houston Texans, and he called. I texted him. I was like, Coach, could you talk? This is after my freshman year. It ends on a high note. I have that Wisconsin game, like, where it ends really well. We walk off the field together. Like, we just beat Wisconsin, huge underdogs. I had that big game, huge touchdown. I remember O'Brien being like, we're going to have a hell of a next few years together, like walking off the field. And then we're on like winter break, and O'Brien calls me. He's like, hey, just so you know, like I'm I'm talking to the Texans. He says, but I'm really just using it as leverage to get what I want from Penn State. And that's what a lot of times fans don't realize. A lot of times coaches, like agents, putting their name out there for jobs is just to get leverage for a new deal at Penn State. And it's not just the coach getting paid. It's more money for support staff, more money for recruiting, a new facility. Like coaches will use that in leverage negotiations. So that's what O'Brien said to me. He's like, we need more at Penn State. I'm using this as leverage. Well, then weeks went by and it got more and more serious with O'Brien and the Texans. And I was like, we haven't really heard an update from Coach O'Brien. So I'll never forget my dad and my parents during this time were really fired up, including like Christian Hackenberg's dad, a bunch of the parents, because like our class went there to play for him, right? And they were all like, if this guy leaves, like seriously, like this is crazy. He should never leave these players. I remember my dad said to me one time, he's like, hey, I'm going to send Coach O'Brien a text message and just be like, hey, I don't know what he was going to say to him, but like I couldn't talk my dad out of it. I didn't want him to, but he texted O'Brien. And again, they were close because of recruiting, so they got to know my dad really well. And they had talked like periodically. O'Brien would like call him and like update him on like my season at my freshman year. So like it wasn't out of the blue that he would text him. Mm-hmm. So he texted O'Brien apparently this like message about, hey, like I really think you should consider staying for these kids. Like thinking that would have any impact on it's hilarious, but it's just like you should stay for these kids. You committed to them, like Adam and Christian and Garrett.
Fair
and all
point.
these guys. Yeah, like they need you, and like we made this choice knowing you'd be here. I'll never forget. I was at home, and I knew my dad was texting O'Brien, and I'm walking down the stairs of my room, and my dad's in his office, and I remember hearing my dad on the phone say, I never forget, he said, Bill, you told these kids you would stay. And he's like on the phone. I'm like, he better not be talking to Bill O'Brien right now. Dude, so I like listen to the rest of the conversation, and they're not like yelling at each other, but they're like very like, they're talking. O'Brien's clearly like hashing it out. I can't hear O'Brien. And I'm just thinking, please tell me this isn't Bill O'Brien he's talking to on the phone. And my dad comes out, he's like, well, just talk to Coach O'Brien. So the funny thing is, O'Brien, as soon as he got the text, calls my dad right away, like calls him on the phone. But at that point, I was hoping O'Brien would leave because I was like, I cannot go back to the team. He'd be like, Adam, you had your daddy call me. But anyway, like, yeah, that happens. And then it was New Year's Eve. Like, we didn't even know it was. We had no clue. Didn't get an update. New Year's Eve New Year's Eve came 2014, like New Year's Eve night, and I saw on ESPN O'Brien's going to the Texans. That's how I found out on the ESPN ticker. And then we were at the Todd's house. We were at Maisie and Maddie Todd's house, and with Ben. I don't know. I forget if you guys were there or not, but. And O'Brien called me at like 12:30, and I didn't answer. I missed the call, and he left me a voicemail. It was just like, "Hey, I'm sure you saw. Like, I tried to tell you first, but the news got it. Like, I love you. Like, I had to do this for my family. I'll explain more when we talk. Like, hopefully I can draft you in a couple of years. Like, you mean the world to me. Blah blah blah. And then like we hardly talked after that. We stayed in touch a little bit, but that was how I found out. Yeah.
Damn, dude, that's a bummer. Also, just because obviously you guys had such a good freshman year, so to kind of think of what could have been there. Not to say like Franklin did a bad job or anything, but it's like you sign up for a specific thing and then something else happens. But what was when he said like him and his family? Wasn't there? I remember reading something where like there was a specific like his son has special needs or something like that, and there was a specific. Is that true?
Yeah.
Or
he has a son that's severely disabled, his oldest son, like 24-hour care. I forget exactly what it is, but like just brutal, like really tough on the family and his wife. And there's a hospital that treats that like exact condition, I believe, in Houston, and that was like one of the reasons they wanted to do it. I'm sure it was more than that too, right? There's that factor. Penn State's a tough job, man. Like. It's a tough place. It's a tough place to follow up Paterno. I mean, there's a lot of reasons that job's a tough one to have. And I think there are a lot of things at Penn State that frustrated Coach O'Brien you're talking about an institution that's so adverse to change for so long. Like they did things one way, and that's the only way they did it for freaking 50 years. Like, and I think he was fed up with that. And it's the same thing Coach Franklin walked into. Like I had him on my pod a few days ago. It comes out in a couple of days. Like we talked about it a lot. I was like, I asked him, what's the thing that surprised you the most when you got to Penn State? He was just like, dude, I had no clue what I was walking into. Like, this place was so adverse to change. It was so outdated in so many areas, like so bureaucratic and hard to get things done at. And he's like, the sanctions. Like, I had no clue what I walked into with regards to the sanctions.
Right.
But yeah, I think O'Brien was dealing with a lot of that stuff. And I don't blame him, man. Like, it was, in the moment, it's like easy to be like, dude, screw this guy. But when you got your family, like, all of our dream was to go to the NFL. It was stupid of us actually to think that like he wasn't going to try to go to the NFL at some point. Because again, you can have the best intention when you say that. Like in that moment when we sat in O'Brien's office and said, "Will you stay here if we commit?" Like I'm sure he did think he was going to stay there. Like he probably was like, "Yeah, like, I'll get you guys. We'll build this thing out. I'll get what I need from the school, and we'll be here 3 years and build this thing together." Like things change, circumstances change, and. Your word's your word at the end of the day, but like I do understand where it came from.
Yeah.
Moving forward to this James Franklin interview, I didn't know about that, but that's cool. I love the like coaches series that you're doing right now, kind of in the summer and the off season, going around interviewing all these different coaches. What goes into setting those up? Like, are you DMing them? Are you finding their assistant's email? Like, how does that all come about? And then what is preparation to interview Jed Fisher, James Franklin, all these big time coaches in college football?
Yeah, it varies a lot based on relationships. Like Franklin obviously comes from me just like calling Franklin and asking him to come on. Some of it, coaches that I don't know personally, the good thing now is with what we've built up over the last few years, a lot of times these coaches, and because I played and coached, like they know of like at least know of me or have seen the content. They like know what it's not like we're coming in out of the blue, right? They at least have some kind of idea. So a lot of it's like reaching out to their assistants or their chief of staff or their what's called the sports information director, the SID at the school who runs the media, and just me emailing them and saying, hey, I want to have Shane Beamer on the podcast. Here's what I would look for. I need an hour of your time. I'll come to you with my video crew. It'll be all positive, blah, 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 blah. So sometimes that happens, and then sometimes it's like Brent Pry, the Virginia Tech head coach who I just had on, like I just DM'd him on Instagram. I was like, hey, coach, you want to come on the pod? He's like, yeah, text my assistant, and his assistant set it up. So it varies based on like how much I know the person, how much I know the coach. Preparation is really, it's I try to prepare like actually pretty little for podcasts. I find that like I'm better when I don't have a set list of like questions or topics I'm trying to get to. Now don't get me wrong, I definitely have like a phone on my lap that has topics because you never want to be caught when you're like can't think of what to say next. But the less I find that the less I script it out, the better the conversation flows. Like Will Compton conversation was my best podcast, I think by far, like best flow, best conversation. And
Same.
that went like completely off the rails. Like it did not flow the way I wanted it to. Now sometimes you're dealing with a guest that like doesn't give you great answers, so then you gotta like have your ideas and your stuff. What I do prepare, I don't prepare questions, I do topics. So like because I've found too during the interview, and now it's different when you're on Zoom, but if you're in person, you don't have time to like look at your phone and read a whole question. Right? So like I have to look at if I'm gonna look at my phone in the middle of an interview, it has to be quick. It has to be like look down, see where I'm at, and then look back up. So I do like one word. It'll be like journey, NIL, recruiting, like that kind of stuff. So like I can look down and then I come up with a question like on the spot. So that's kind of how I prepare and how I make it happen. And it's been good. There are times where I'll finish an interview and be like in the moment, I just wish I could have like taken this to a better direction, and I don't feel like I do a good job of it. But sometimes you crush it, and sometimes it's better than you think it was, or worse than you thought it was going to be. The old Joe Pa saying, like you're never as good as you think you are, and you're never as bad as you think you are. So I found that to be the case in some of these interviews.
Yeah, kind of going back to the Will Compton thing, like that interview is sweet, and I feel like he's kind of dipped his feet into like entertainers and stuff like that. Is that something you see? You going that direction or kind of a little bit of both? Obviously you did the Jersey Jerry thing, and that was a great podcast too. But I feel like almost with coaches, they're not as used to doing the lights are on, the mic's on, they might not be as entertaining as someone who, is entertaining for their job, like obviously Compton will have like Bert Kreischer, Shane Gillis, and those kind of guys on. I feel like they have like a cult following. So I feel like it's interesting to see those guys do it as former NFL players.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think I'm definitely trying to, so much of my content is college football focused, so much of it, all the social media stuff. And that was a very intentional decision. Like when I got into it, it's not NFL. It's not like, it's very college football. We'll like dominate that niche and then expand from there. But on the podcast side, I do like to show that I can be a guy that can like hit a lot of different demographics and a lot of different, a lot of different groups and segments of people, like entertainers, athletes, football, basketball, all that kind of stuff. So the answer is yes. Like I'm trying to do more and more entertainers and athletes and like barstool personalities and things like that. The football, obviously football comes easy with the guests on that standpoint, but I mean, yeah, it really for the podcast, it's so guest dependent, especially the kind that I do, where like I don't really do a talk show at all. It's just interviews and conversations. Mm-hmm. So like you're really dependent on the guest. It's on me to be able to book the people and to be able to get them on the show. So like, and a lot of it comes from like recommendations. Like Will's trying to set me up with Taylor right now, and then like it all comes like Jersey Jerry is the reason I got on with Will, and it all just kind of spirals from there. I mean, there's even like, there's always consideration of like what route we should go. And there's always options for the guests. Like literally we were just talking about, the overtime Megan. You guys know who that is? Like the famous girl on TikTok.
I know there's like overtime people who are really big time.
Like, but they're all like personalities, talent per se. Like they aren't athletes. Like trying to think of like if it makes sense or not.
Yeah, they have those huge followings. So you do an episode with them, and then their base will watch them no matter what
No doubt.
what podcast they're on. Is that how it works?
And even like nowadays, so much of it, yeah, if you can get the person to share it themselves, it's huge. But even YouTube does such a good job now of like showing people that are a fan of Will Compton my podcast with Will Compton, even if Will doesn't share it, right? Like it's just all algorithm based. Like all those algorithms find a way to just show, they just know what everyone wants, and your content gets in front of them some way or another.
Right. Yeah. What was
Yeah,
Will
you both
Compton
get
like?
low
He seemed like the man.
Yeah, it was really cool. I mean, like he was super easy to like one of the easiest people to to like interact with and schedule with. And I literally just, it's funny. So Jersey Jerry pod came out, ripped, and the trailer was great. It was him talking about his sobriety. And Will followed me after that. Will actually followed me first on Instagram. So he follows me. And then I followed him right back. And then like I waited, didn't want to look too desperate, right? I waited like 2 weeks. And then I was like, hey man, like, big fan of your stuff. Would love to have you on the pod. Like I'll come to you whenever you want. And then it was kind of like, yeah, let's do it, but didn't really get scheduled. And then I was going to be in Nashville for a week. So I texted him, I messaged him, like, I'm going to be in Nashville this week. When can you do the pod? And it was super easy. Like, Thursday, like anytime Thursday or Friday afternoon. We just found a time and ripped it out. And he was cool. I mean, he definitely came into the podcast like wanting to talk about stuff, which was really, really fun and like really cool. He was saying on the pod, I forget if this was on camera or off camera, he was saying like, dude, my whole life is a bit. He's like, it's always a joke, He's like, so I'm excited to like, because he said, which was kind of cool that he gave me this reputation. He's like, your stuff's like personal and serious, right? I was like, well, yeah, I guess. Like, he's like, people tell their life stories on your pod, right? I'm like, yeah, like let's do it. So he was like, that, my stuff's all a joke. I'd like to talk about like my life, and he got emotional on the pod. They talked about how he like got his chance in the NFL, and talked about even the Barstool, like the finance, the money stuff. People love that.
That was really
like,
interesting.
He was talking about how he did his Barstool deal, and like it was cool. He came into this like wanting to talk about that, and told me like, dude, ask me how much money I got from Barstool, and I'll give you the scoop. So he was cool, and I think it always helps when a guy that hosts a podcast is like on a podcast, so he knows what's going to do well.
Right.
He's giving me clips intentionally, so he was really cool, man. I was all those guys like Jersey Jerry was super cool. Like Jersey Jerry, we finished the pod and like he stayed at the house for like an hour and a half, and we're just shooting.
I was just gonna ask, like after a podcast is done, like after you clean up with Will Compton, is it just like, all right, talk to you later?
Yeah, well, we went so long that he was like, dude, he actually had to like run. He was like so late for a meeting. But yeah, I mean, most of those guys, like you do when you have like a 2-hour conversation with someone, you kind of like become friends with them, right? Like you get to know them pretty well. Yeah. So like, yeah, I mean, Will and I have stayed in touch a little bit, but Jersey Jerry, like I said, just hung out after for a while. It always varies, but yeah, Jersey Jerry was like, dude, come out the Barstool bar tonight. He was inviting us out. Stevie was like, I'm there, dude, I'm there.
That's awesome. So what's the difference between like, obviously you have your podcast, right? And then you're doing stuff with, is it Mercury Sports?
Yeah, Mercury. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what's like their business model, or what's their, value proposition? I guess I've seen like some stuff with them, but I couldn't really decipher what they're really doing.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. Yeah, we get that question a lot. It's like we know you guys are like doing a bunch of stuff, and it's cool, but like, what is it really?
Right.
So high level, Mercury started a couple years ago, raised some venture financing, and then made a pivot in the last year and a half to really a sports media first company. So. And that when they were making that pivot is when they approached me. Porter Grieve, who's is the founder and CEO, approached me and was like, "Hey, we want to bring you in." And I became a co-founder at the time. I'm not a day one co-founder, but I'm an equity partner in the business, so I got the co-founder title. And so Mercury, like the business model is this. So one, it's a sports media production company. So there's 3 verticals of the business. One is partnerships with colleges and universities. And through those partnerships, we monetize things on top of our access and the content for the school. So we partner directly with Oklahoma, Kansas, Kentucky, Clemson, Penn State. We get access to their facilities, their stadium, We do NIL deals with their players. So we create all this content and these fan experiences and then monetize on top of that. So like hypothetical numbers, like just so I don't give away real numbers, like we pay $100,000 to Oklahoma for the access to all this stuff. We then go make $1 million, right? By selling sponsorships and all that stuff. It's a business model pretty common in college sports. Companies called like, we're not a direct competitor of these, but we're similar in the sense of like a Learfield or a Playfly. I don't know if you've heard of those companies before. They go to a place like freaking Oregon. They're like, hey, Oregon Athletics, we're going to buy your exclusive media rights and pay you $20 million for it. We now own your rights and own the ability to sell all sponsorship on everything Oregon Athletics. And they go sell $40 million worth, and they make the difference, right? And then what the school gets is they get the guaranteed. They know how much money they're getting in sponsorship rights every single year, right? So that's their model. Ours is similar, but on more of a fan experience content side. So they'll sell like billboards on the sidelines to Pepsi. We have access to the stadium, do fan experiences, VIP tours, all that kind of stuff, and content on top of it, monetize all of that on the school side. And then we have an in-house productions team, so production for hire. Essentially, we have in-house editors, designers, all that stuff. So we work with different conferences, like working on some deals right now, work with the Big 12, they just essentially hire us to create their content because they think our stuff's really cool. And then we have a podcast network. So Podcast Network owns 7 shows right now, expanding even more. My podcast is one of them that I partnered with Mercury on and brought my show into their wheelhouse. And then we have an in-house sales team that sells sponsorship against all that stuff. So it's a flywheel of school partnerships, in-house production, podcast network, all kind of touch each other at some point in the flywheel. But we're monetizing on all those sides, and like the production arm obviously works with the podcast network because we're producing the podcast, and some of the podcasts are for the schools, so it's a flywheel, and we monetize on all ends of it. If that makes sense. So
makes a lot of sense. On the like the example you gave, where like Oregon will get $20 million by that company, is like TV rights outside of that is like
outside of it,
merch outside of that, like jerseys and stuff like that, or.
I'm not sure. I think merch is outside of that. So Learfield and Playfly, they do. Yes, TV deal would be outside of that. I think like local television sometimes is like part of those deals. Mm-hmm. They do like all stadium stuff, any like venue things. They sell sponsorship to, and then they'll do like any like social media sponsorships, all that kind of stuff. Like anything on like the Oregon Athletics account, anything on the like. It's everything excluding television. I'm pretty sure, and merchandise may be part of it, or I think that's more. I'm not sure. I'm not sure on the merchandise,
Gotcha.
But yeah, that's the model. And again, it benefits the school because they can, how those athletic departments are. They want to know how much money they're going to have in, so they can budget every single year. When they're projecting for the year, so they get the guaranteed revenue, and then Learfield or Playfly or these companies that buy up all their rights. By the exclusive rights, they'll go put like a team on the ground. So like if you're going and sponsoring the Beaver Stadium stuff, you're actually dealing with a Learfield Penn State rep who you think is like you wouldn't even know the difference. If you didn't know the model, you would think they worked for Penn State. But they actually work for Learfield, not for Penn State. And Learfield buys exclusive rights. The difference between us is we don't buy exclusive rights. We just buy the ability to use the stadium this amount of times,
Gotcha.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That's wild. Yeah. Have all these
Mercury lesson for you.
Yeah, no, it is interesting. I mean, like, have all these sprung up within the past, like, NIL time frame, or has this been going on before NIL?
It's been, so the Learfields, Playflies, like, those have been going on since NIL. The part where we had our, like, differentiator value prop was we could use NIL and the access to athletes to do, one, really cool content, really cool shows, and really cool experiences for the fans. So, like, we just did the VIP, we call it the VIP field experience at Oklahoma. So, like, we get access. We got 40 fans that all bought $high tickets. They can they're running on the field, getting their name announced in the stadium, their names on the scoreboard. They're getting towards the locker room, and then for part of it, we can bring players that we have NIL deals with to show up and meet the fans. So, again, it's all just economics. Like we sell a bunch of tickets, maybe sell a sponsor for the event. Whatever. We didn't sell sponsorship for that one, but we sold a bunch of tickets, like get sponsored for the event, ticket sales, and then you got obviously the cost of the venue and the players showing up, but it's a scalable model. And then for us, it's like the way we're a venture-backed business, right? So we've raised $7 million in a seed round, raising a bridge round right now. When you in these kind of businesses, you got to show scalability. I mean, you know that as well as anyone, Danny. Like, it's like, how do you scale? People are like, great, like, okay, you monetize your Oklahoma partnership, but how do you monetize 50 of them, right?
Right.
So for us, it's showing that, like, if we just do the Penn State deal, you can monetize the Penn State deal, and you can make multiple seven figures on a school partnership and with the content, with 10 employees. That model's scalable to then go say, okay, the way you get to X amount in revenue and a massive valuation is you go scale it with the same model, 10 employees per school, and you scale it across 25 schools, and then do the math on that. You're doing a lot in revenue. So
Sure.
that's the model. Now, like, we're in the prove that we can monetize at that level phase right now of the business.
Right. Have you seen any of these companies go, get sold or anything like that? Like, what are they sort of valuing them on? Do you know?
Yeah. So our specific niche is a little different. I mean,
no good comps out there.
No great comps. I mean, the comps that there's comps for the different part. The part that makes us different, and the reason investors like us, is because of the school partnerships that most media companies don't have, and the fact that we have the content built on the back of it, right? If we were just a media company, we wouldn't be valued very much. If we were just the school partnerships, we wouldn't be valued very much. It's a combination of all of it together, makes it really cool. So on the media side, you would go look at like a Barstool Sports, The Volume, Colin Cowherd's Podcast Network, all that part. And then on the partnership side, you look at like Learfield, Playfly, the ones I just said. We're a combination of both. So, I mean, it's tough to, and we're going to build out, as we raise more money, build out the whole media side into a whole content arm that does way more than just 6 shows in the model of like a Volume or a Barstool or a Whistle Sports or one of those, while we have these partnerships that the content all drives people to these monetization parts of the partnership. So, yeah, I mean, it's we don't have a great comp. I mean, a lot of the companies that we think like would be interested in something like this in the future is like a Fanatics, is like a Learfield or a Playfly, one of these massive companies that would just say, screw this, like, let's just bring them under our wing and have them as an extension of us. Like that's the goal. Fanatics is such a big one because they're trying to build like that digital home for sports and like the best fandom experience. That's something that, like, in 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, it's like, that's something that we think that's like a North Star, like, to have that conversation with them. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, I feel like the media landscape has changed so much that it's like opens up all those sorts of opportunities.
No doubt.
Cool. The last thing I wanted to bring up to you is I'm a big routine guy, so I love learning about people's morning routines to get them going, setting them up for a good day. Like, what's your workout regimen? Are you into like any recovery stuff? What are you doing?
Yeah, so I travel a ton, so that routine is always difficult for me. Luckily, I live with our good friend Ben Kunkel, who, when I am home, I think he's got I can smell dinner cooking right now. So he's in the kitchen cooking something up. And he's obviously like super routine oriented and does great in the kitchen and diet and that stuff. So it definitely holds me accountable when I'm home. My issue is normally when I'm on the road. It's like, how do you, number one, work out? How do you eat healthy? I've always been like a stress eater too. When I get stressed, I eat. It's like one of my downfalls. So for me, like, being on the road is always, I just tell myself, like, number one, like, it's not going to be good when I'm on the road, but like, how can I minimize the damage when I'm on the road, right? Like, I'm not going to work out as well on the road, but like, can I come back home like 20% less as out of shape as I would have if I was totally a slob on the road. But when I'm home, I get in a really good routine. I work out City Fitness in the morning, and then a place that Ryan actually put me on to was, there's a place called Reset by Therabody right beside City Fitness Fishtown. And, Ryan's thing to me was like, dude, when you go on your trips, you should really just like get an IV, like reset your body, like when you get back from traveling. And that was when I first went to that place. And then I like found out they had all this other stuff. They had like cryo chamber, freaking massages, IVs, red light therapy, all this stuff. So literally every single day when I finish my workout, I go right in there and do cryo, some days an IV, some days not, some days red light therapy, like some different stuff. They have therapists like stretch you out in that place. It's like $325 a month. Like not bad, for like all that.
Sick.
I mean, you're getting a bunch of IVs. Like it's a pretty good deal. And that's been a big part of like my recovery now. And I do it when I get back from traveling. I'll do an IV, like a Myers cocktail with like a bunch of hydration stuff, and it makes me feel better. I don't know if it's placebo effect or not, but like I definitely feel better after I do it. And it's been a good part of of my routine when I'm home, and it's gotten me back on track when I get off the road. But definitely need to figure out my on the road routine.
Yeah, that's sweet. Like what's in the IV? Is it just sort of like standard like hydration stuff, like, and a couple vitamins?
Glutathione.
B12.
What's that?
B12's a good one.
B12, glutathione. There's usually
all right. So high doses of B, vitamin C, minerals, magnesium, calcium, sterile water, and glutathione.
That's a good one.
I don't even know.
I'd take that right now.
I first learned about IVs because Rogan used to talk about Dave Chappelle used to get them every time he would touch down a city. He would have a nurse meet him wherever he was and just get an IV because traveling just takes it out of you, especially if you're going coast to coast and the time zones are different. And no matter if you're hungover, traveled, didn't sleep, it feels like a complete reset. It's like the greatest thing.
For sure.
Can I get a Danny Jackson synopsis on the current state of the U.S. economy?
How long do you have? I don't know. I feel like it is such a, and this is just a very soft response, or like there's nothing you haven't heard on like CNBC, but just so uncertain. The speed in which we've raised interest rates, and then on the kind of reverse side of that, you have these mid-tier banks failing because they bought a bunch of government bonds. So the Fed is like, well, if we keep raising interest rates to, stop inflation, then more of these middle-tier banks that bought a bunch of government bonds are going to go insolvent, which, creates some sort of liquidity issue. So the Fed has their hands full. I don't know, dude. I feel like there's got to be some sort of correction, whether it's, just in the equity markets, whether it's in housing markets. I'm holding a lot of cash because I'm so concerned about, buying a bunch and then having a correction happen. What do you, I feel like you invest a lot. Like, what are you kind of thinking?
Yeah, I mean, I do a decent amount of investing, probably too much at some point because I don't know. I'm not a big I'm not like a finance guy. Like, it's funny when I do like certain things with my brother's a big finance guy, like works in New York City finance. Like you, Danny, like I talked to you about stuff. Like Chris Walker is another good friend of mine who is a big finance guy, and like they always like laugh at like my lack of analytics on the back end of some of my investments.
Just a feel guy.
Yeah, I'm just feeling it out, man.
Yeah, hey, it works.
Yeah, I mean, I have no clue. Like, obviously, like I've heard a million things. I read a lot about it. I think obviously more interest rate spikes are coming up. They can't figure out how to stop inflation.
Mm-hmm.
So like, what's that mean for the housing market? What's that mean for all that stuff? My thing that I always try to tell myself is, because of like the ability to take on risk that I'm in right now, like I normally try to default to that my investments are long-term investments and that no matter what really happens, I'm going to be okay. And I know that's maybe like a privileged way of looking at it, but that's just how I view things.
That's definitely a good view.
I mean, I've thought about liquidating a lot of stuff, like liquidating the stock market. I mean, honestly, Chris Walker's told me, he's like, dude, get out of any risk asset, like get out of it, like right now. And I'm just like, I don't know. Like, I don't know if it's worth like now I am selling all my crypto right now, which has been an absolute disaster for
Crypto
me.
is a disaster. But yeah, kind of like what you were saying, like a strategy that I'm, toying with is that a lot of people make a bunch of money when the shit hits the fan, Exactly. So to have a bunch of capital ready to go, like when something happens, but people would be very wealthy if they knew how to time the market, which is sort of the difficult thing to do. So, you could be holding for 4 years and not making any return, but I think it's inevitable. So it'd be
Yeah, I
nice
mean,
to
that's
have
the hard
capital.
part, right? Like knowing when that time is, like
Exactly.
when is the time to deploy the cash. That's like almost what I don't trust myself enough with. And like I have good people, like good that like good advisors and people that help me out and stuff. I just get nervous of if I do hold everything in cash, do I hold it one too long? Two, am I more likely to make a higher risk investment because I know I have the cash sitting there? Am I more likely to? It's a psyche thing with myself, right? Like it's more like this isn't what I focus on. So like I'm good at like I don't focus and sit here and think about finance and the markets all day. I don't analyze venture backed businesses. Like that's not what I do. So like that's not my differentiator. So like am I really gonna have a leg up on anyone by doing that? Probably not. And I may make a bad choice and I won't know. I may miss the time to get in the market or I won't know when when the right time is. So that's kind of like again, it's more of a personal thing of the like I'd rather just like keep putting money in the stock market, keep putting money into real estate, and like knowing that these are like 20-year plays for me.
Sure. Yeah, and that's
it
the
probably
play.
isn't gonna really matter.
Yeah, absolutely. There's just more, in a shitty time in the market and a down point in the market, there's
No doubt.
you like run your risk of like making a bad investment is less so because it's so low.
Yeah,
But
so
again,
low. Yeah.
kind of figuring when that time is very tough.
Yeah,
But I got
Warren Buffett thing. It's like be greedy when others are fearful, and be fearful when others are greedy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's sort of my thought process. But I don't have $1 billion to invest. But two last questions for you. With going back to the Mercury thing, is betting involved in that at all, or because obviously Barstool is sort of one of their big value propositions is the ability to sell their sports book through Penn.
Yeah, good question. So it's a conversation we have a lot. The difficult part is the school partnerships.
Right. That's
and
kind of what I was
the
thinking.
ability. Yeah, no, it's a good question, and we get asked it a lot too by investors. So your mind's in the right spot.
Thank you.
It's one of the first questions we get. 'Cause I mean, that's where the money is. Like,
Right.
even like me personally, outside of Mercury, like one of my biggest things from my personal brand is like my sports betting stuff. Like that
Right. What's the
drives a
site?
lot. Like,
you can plug it now, dude. What's that site?
Prize Picks code Adam B for $100
Hell yeah.
deposit bonus. So like that's a big driver for me. So like that's where the money is, dude. Like these sports books pay a ton of money in customer acquisition costs. For us, we have because for any content or shows that's not part of a school partnership, we're able to like incorporate sports betting if we want to. If we want to do, if FanDuel wants to sponsor, Prize Pick sponsors some of that stuff. So we can do it for our whole company to like be backed by a sports book or for us to sell sponsorship on everything. We couldn't do right now because of the school partnerships. I do think that the sports betting landscape in college sports is going to change, and that more. I mean, you're seeing the NFL is putting sports books in the stadiums.
Right.
That's going to happen. Like money talks, dude. At the end of the day, money always talks in every aspect. Every part of college football is going towards professionalism, nationalization, and monetization. You don't think that sports betting is going to follow somehow into college sports? I mean, the players won't be betting, but you tell me the sports at the athletic departments aren't going to get a cut of that somehow. I think at some point that's going to happen, and then we'll be ready to pounce on it. But right now we can't. So,
gotcha.
Just because of the partnerships.
I always wonder how much money these sports betting companies have because it seems I'm a UFC guy. It seems like every single UFC fighter, and there's 600 plus of them, have a DraftKings, like they're sponsored by DraftKings, and I'm like, how much money do they really have to give out? But it's all about if they can bring on one person, they're probably getting their return.
Yeah, I mean, I know like for a lot of these sports books, they spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars in customer acquisition costs for. I mean, even the daily fantasy companies that aren't sports books. I mean. My deal with Prize Picks is a little more convoluted because it's multiple facets. But like, I know if you're on like a strict CPA deal with a daily fantasy company, that means that you get paid when someone signs up for the app. No other they're not paying you a flat fee. It's just paid when someone signs up. They're paying north of $100 per user. So like, just do the math on that. I mean, number one, as an influencer, like if you can get 100 people a month, that's $10,000, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And then, but for a sports book, I mean, $100 just for, and that's not calculating in like any other customer acquisition cost. That's just for the influencer that brought them to the table. I mean, that's a lot of money they're shelling out for a user. Like
Right.
But it just
Yeah.
shows how profitable sports books are. If they get one user, like, how
Profitable,
much money they make.
profitable in some aspect. Like, but I guess like if you look at DraftKings, if you look at FanDuel, they're not cash flow
They're not.
positive.
They're not.
But they're investing so much money. There's so much money to be in. I think Barstool or Penn is cash flow positive, but it's interesting that their sort of thought process is let us be the big dogs when everything settles over, and we'll be able to make this kind of money forever. But they're paying McAfee like $100 million, and then and they're not positive. So it's kind of interesting to look at that whole landscape and
that's a huge issue now in the sports betting market is these sports books are paying so much in customer acquisition cost, and then they're realizing that there's no friction there. Like the ability to lose that customer is so quick and easy if McAfee goes from FanDuel to DraftKings, and then if the promos get better at DraftKings, right? I mean, again, in customer acquisition costs, it's not just marketing spend; it's also the free money they're giving out to sign up. I mean, they're like $3,000 bets,
$1,000,
things like that. I mean, yeah. So there's so much, and I know like that they're reshifting that whole model, and like even FanDuel I think is like part of the McAfee deal got cut out, but like they're even restructuring. Like FanDuel had like FanDuel TV, they were doing like a whole TV network to drive customers. I think they're like cutting back on that from what I've heard. So yeah, that whole model's shifting because like you said, no one's making money. They're not cash flow positive.
And that gets back to like your question about the economy. Like it used to be pretty cheap to borrow money, and now it's they're paying a lot for that money that they're borrowing.
Yeah.
And then last question is for your interviews, like what was one interview that you did that you were like, it might be all right, and then the person you interviewed ended up being like hilarious. Maybe it was a coach, maybe it was some player. Is there anyone who you were like, this might be all right, and then ended up being like a funny guy's guy? Hate to put you on the spot.
That's a great question. Yeah, that's a good question.
I didn't listen to Shiano, but I feel like he would be a.
That's what I was gonna say. Like Shiano was probably my favorite coach's interview because he just came like ready to roll. And you know what helps, dude? What helps is if I have a good relationship with like a staffer that works for him. So I know his chief of staff who helped him, who's a big content guy, like been following me for a while, and we got to know each other. Like he prepped him. He was like, dude, Coach Shiano, like only like. Don't do this podcast if you're not ready to talk. If you're just gonna like give them random sound bites, like, this isn't the place to do it, right? He's like he's gonna try to get you to talk. So like Shano came in, like put his feet up and just started talking about a bunch of stuff, and he gave us some gems, dude, like some great stories just about. I mean, he's been through so much in college, college football and all that stuff. But yeah, he was awesome. I'll be honest, dude. Like I didn't think Jersey Jerry was going to be a great guest going into it. I'll give Stevie credit on that one. I didn't think he was going to pop like he did, and obviously I was wrong because that was probably one of our most viewed ones yet. He was really cool. It has an awesome story, and it's hard sometimes, dude. Like I struggle to know if a guy has a big following or not. Like obviously, like followers on social media is one thing, but like do his followers like drive people to go watch a podcast? Like that's a hard barometer to like figure out. And I always, this is a game I play in my head. If I'm thinking about a guest, I always say like the reason right now, like I wouldn't be a great podcast guest for big podcasts is because like there aren't many people that are like, oh, I'm a fan of Adam Breneman. Like I'm just a huge fan of him. Like I'm not there yet. Like my goal is to be someday, but I'm not there. But like I think like, okay, Will Compton, like there is a huge demographic that would say I'm a Will Compton fan. Like they proudly would say that. And that's like the barometer I try to like Second Wind, a podcast that we own at Mercury, had on, Jordan Schultz, who's like this NFL reporter, massive following. Like he like has millions of followers. And we had him on, and like it flopped, like 200 views on YouTube, like just total flop for like the resources we put into it. And I went back to thinking about it, and I went to that model. Like, would anyone actually say like I'm a Jordan Schultz fan? Like, no, like, no one would say that. He's an NFL reporter, But like someone like Bob Does Sports, like it was the best episode they did, and I'm thinking, And when they got him, I was like, he's not going to pop. Like, it won't be that good of an episode. He's a social media influencer. But, like, then I started thinking, like, tons of people would say I'm a Bob Does Sports fan. I'm a Brilliantly Dumb fan. Like, that's the barometer I try to follow. I know it's a long-winded, I didn't really answer your question. But, yeah, that's always a struggle of, like, figuring out who would be a good guest and who wouldn't. Because, really, for views, like, I have my base people that watch. But to get, like, the 20, 40, 50,000 views an episode, you got to get people that drive traffic to the video that want to watch their interview.
Right. It's not like a one-to-one followers to how many people would listen to the podcast, you know?
Followers mean nothing nowadays anyway, because like with the algorithms, like it means that you could have 1 million TikTok followers and videos get 300 views. Followers don't mean anything because the algorithm shows you good content. It doesn't show you your followers.
Right.
It doesn't show you. It's not like a timeline anymore. So like followers like are irrelevant really nowadays in social media, which is kind of crazy to think about.
That is wild.
Yeah, because there's so many people on social media that have 1 million followers or have a lot of followers. And that's one thing that Mr. Beast and all these big influencers say. It's all about how good your content is. If it's good content, if it's appeasing to the eyes, if it's done very well, then it'll be put in the algorithm and a lot of people will watch it.
Yeah, and too, like when it comes to the content, the algorithm is like your biggest gift, but also like your biggest curse. At the end of the day, the algorithm dictates if content's good or not. So that's like you guys on the pod, which like we're making jokes about how much content I post, which like is true. Like I post a shit ton of content, but I always tell my team, like the guys that do the content, the guys that post, we always are like evaluating like, is this a good piece of content or not? Is it a good video? Like my default is just post it, and the algorithm will dictate if it's good or not. True. If no one wants to see it, no one's going to see it, right? Like no one will actually see it because it's going to get 30 views. But if it's good, so that's why we post so much. Is I'm just like, shoot, let's just make a bunch of content and for me, like if you go look at my views, like my views consistently are not good across social media. Like I do not get a lot of views on Instagram. Now, like monthly, I'll do 30, 40 million a month on Instagram. But like if you go look at the last 10 videos, most of them are like 4,000, 7,000 views, 2,000. Then you get 978,000, and then the 4 later it's like 1.2 million, and then the next one's like 2,000 views. It's just the algorithm dictating what video is good and stuff.
Just a numbers game at the end of the day.
Just a numbers game,
yeah.
I think what a lot of people don't know about a lot of these accounts is the team that's actually behind them. Like it's fascinating that there's like script writers for videos, that there's camera people who set everything up. There's people who probably prepare you for your interviews. There's people who do all the editing. Like there's so much that goes into making the video good quality, and I don't think that enough people even know that.
Yeah, I mean the team is definitely like I would never be able to. Because also like I'm not a full-time like content creator. Like I do a lot of other stuff too. Like with Mercury building that, like some of the investment stuff I do, like different stuff. There's so much stuff that I do that I wouldn't be able to do it all if it wasn't for my, like the guys that post the content, the guys that help me with ideas, and the videographers and the editors. Like literally, I'll shoot videos. Like it's a good like I'll shoot videos literally in my living room. I'll shoot like 14 of them or 20 of them, and like I don't see the videos again until I get a text with a caption like, "Do you approve this to post?" And now like I do approve everything because like I don't want to like I got to see it before it goes up and make sure it's like I don't say anything stupid or the caption's written well, like good grammar. I don't want to look like a moron. But like, yeah, like, there's a whole process that like is scheduling it out. I have a kid that not a kid, he's graduated now, Noah, who's a beast who like manages he does like manages all that stuff for me and then like the team. But it's a big operation, not just, part of it's Mercury. So part of it's like their team, like our team at Mercury, like working with my personal team and like what that looks like. But yeah, it's definitely a big expense. But I kind of made the investment knowing that I wouldn't be able to grow if it was. I tried to like go with like I'm going to post the content myself, and you just get distracted, like you get busy, you're like it doesn't happen.
That'd be brutal.
Yeah. I have one last question. How do you think the Livy Dunn podcast will do with the Nuck Boys? Do you think that'll be huge?
Yeah, I mean, go back to the theory I just said, right? I mean, how many people would say I'm a Livy Dunn fan? I'd probably say that.
I'm a fan.
I think what's interesting.
Strictly gymnastics.
Really you never really hear her talk. I'm actually curious to like hear a little bit of her story.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, dude, the whole like full send thing, like what an unreal model for like how to create that, and like what they're doing now with what they're doing with Happy Dad, like say whatever you want about Full Send and Kyle, and like I get arguments. I think Kyle is like one of the great young like American entrepreneurs. Like I truly believe that, and people are giving me crap for saying that, but like what he's built on the back of like starting as YouTube Pregson, he's just a grinder and has figured it out. And you can tell how smart he is in some of those podcasts when he asks like really cool questions. But like what they've done with Happy Dad, and that's the trend with creators now. And even like I've thought about like what could I ever do at some point for a consumer good product, because the whole model of just like doing brand deals, eventually like there's a cap on that, right? And then you're just constantly like selling. You're like a sellout. You're selling your brand for like, you know, you're selling your personal brand for a brand to get access to it. But if you actually have ownership of something and have a partner in it and like can grow a real consumer good product, like that's where you like what Logan Paul did with Prime and
with those three,
bigger than yourself.
It's the same thing. It's like you build such a big following. It's Barstool. You build such a big following, then you come out with something. And it's Full Send, the same thing. Logan Paul, kind of the same thing, but not that same rabid fan base, but still a crazy fan base. But yeah, I mean, if you have people who will do whatever, you know, they want to drink a Happy Dad because it's their favorite person produced it, you know. Kind of goes hand in glove.
It's also smart to make it a little bit separate from the brand. Like they were geniuses making that Happy Dad and not a Full Send.
100%.
That's gonna last forever, I think.
That's what John Shadid, I think, is his name, the guy that runs Full Send operations. But like, he was talking about like the goal, like with Prime. Prime's way bigger than Logan Paul now. Like the kids, there was an article I was just reading about it. Like kids are like it was about a kids at school drinking Prime because it's cool. They have no clue who Logan Paul is. They were like interviewing the kids that were drinking it. Like, I don't know who that is. But like, now will Happy Dad ever get bigger than the Nelk Boys? Like, I don't know. Like, I think most people that drink it now know the Nelk Boys and stuff, and they're like, this is why I'm drinking it. But yeah, that's the goal, right? You got to get bigger than your brand.
Yeah.
I think it'll last longer. I think that's what's smart. I think that brand will last longer. I think Nelk will sometime fizzle out, but that's why you come up with the brand. But
I had Sahil Bloom on the pod. I don't know if you've seen any of his stuff, Danny. Like was a finance guy. Now he's like got millions of followers on like Twitter and stuff. He's like, he has a venture fund, all this stuff. So I had him on the pod. It comes out in a couple of weeks, and it was really interesting to hear about his business model, and because he doesn't do brand deals. He's like, I'm not doing that stuff. That's like JV stuff. I was like, felt kind of offended. But he was talking about how like he has all these businesses that like he turned all of his cost centers and content like into profit centers. Like he was doing videos. He started a video service for others, right? And he just is like, the model is like create an audience, and then create a service that's high ticket dollar where you only have to drive like a few people a month to like make a lot of money. You don't need to drive like hundreds and hundreds or thousands. And then just partner with a great operator. Like find a great operator. You give them a massive part of the business, and then you drive the users in like a hot $5,000, $10,000 a month business. And start that way. And on the podcast, he was like talking to me. He's like, dude, if I'm you right now and you're following and your background, I'm starting a recruiting service where I consult kids through the recruiting process on how to get recruited, and I'm charging them $5,000 a month, and I'm getting 20 clients. And he goes, you have a $1 million business. I was like, wow, dude, that's really smart.
He just gave that to you for free. That's awesome.
Now it's a little bit easier said than done to get 20 clients. Yeah,
for sure.
But it's an interesting model, like from a creator standpoint.
Yeah. Well, this is awesome, Breneman. I got a lesson in new media. Great to have you on the podcast.
We need you to blow up a little bit. So I think my dream would to be like a character on the Pat McAfee show, just like one of those guys. I don't know who they are. We'll let Adam, you can be Pat McAfee, but just let us have our own desk there in the Thunderdome.
Yeah,
true.
I'm in. I think maybe in a few months we do another episode in person. Maybe we just like kind of grab some.
I think that'd be sick.
Get a video crew out there, and we get some, and then I can use the content for social media too. That'd be great. You know.
True. That'd be ideal.
But yeah,
I think an offer from our last guest offered us one free episode with like the real cameras, mics, all that stuff. So we got to take him up on that with a.
Does he still have that equipment though? That's gonna be the question.
That's a good question.
We haven't talked to him recently.
Right. I won't stir the pot. All right.
Anyway, coming on. Thanks for listening, everyone. Peace.
See you, Adam.